Welcome to the Lida Citroën Podcast, your space to grow your influence and elevate your personal brand. In each episode, you'll hear inspiring stories, expert insights, and practical strategies to help you stand out, lift up others, and leave your mark on your team, your community, or the world. If you're ready to make your voice heard, you're in the right place. Let's dive in.
Hello, friends. I am so excited to be with you today. If this is your first time hearing the Lida Citroën Podcast, then welcome. I hope you enjoyed today's conversation. If you've joined us before, welcome back. We've got a lot more to cover today, and I'm going to be talking about two ideas that are really fundamental when it comes to personal branding, building influence, and really the ability to stop playing small. The first is this thing we call a perception gap, the difference between how you're known and how you want to be known. And the second is this idea of credibility. How do we establish credibility in a world that is so noisy and so loud and so fast? How do we stand out for the things that we want to stand out for and really earn a legacy and reputation that's meaningful and impactful? Let's talk about the first one. So a perception gap is when the people around you perceive you and receive you differently than how you want to be known. And the reason that matters is, let's say you want to be seen as a leader. You want to be seen as someone who is thoughtful and compassionate and insightful, but the people around you perceive you as a doer, a worker, someone who's really good at hitting deadlines. Well, there may not be a problem with that perception, but it's not what you want. So how do you move towards the perception you want, but not lose the assets or the qualities that are positive? Now, in the case where the perception gap is a negative perception gap, that requires a little bit of a more unique strategy, right? So let's say that we asked people around you, how do you think of Julie? And people said, oh, can't stand her. Really hate when she's in a meeting. Always, takes over the conversation and doesn't let other people speak. And you want to be seen as someone who is empowering and insightful. Okay, Julie's got a problem, right? Because that isn't working. Julie's seen negatively, and therefore that perception that these people around her have is probably limiting opportunities. Maybe she's not getting invited to important conversations because of that negative perception. Maybe she's not being promoted or advanced or recruited to other positions because of this negative perception. So whether the perception is fine, but it's not as impactful as you'd like, or whether it's negative, it's important to understand where you're starting and where you want to go, right? Do you remember the line in the book Alice in Wonderland, where Alice comes to a fork in the road and she looks up and she sees the Cheshire Cat, right? This is a famous story that we all grew up with, or at least I did. And she comes to the fork in the road and she sees the Cheshire Cat and she says, which way do I go? And the Cheshire Cat says, well, where are you headed? And she says, I don't know. His response is, then it really doesn't matter which route you take. What's important in reputation management is to have a direction, to have a sense of where you're going. So while I would love to start with where you are, let's start with where you want to go. Where do you want your reputation to be? How do you want to be remembered? And one of the easiest, maybe not so easiest ways to think about that is to go all the way to the end. How do you want to be remembered at the end of your life, or the end of your career, or the end of your time at this company, whatever the end is for you? How do you want people to look back and remember you? What difference did you make? What impact did you have? How did you serve? Who did you serve? Did we know you? What did we feel working alongside you, being led by you, being influenced by you? What do you want that to look like? Many of us spend all our time going through, on this hamster wheel of get things done, move on to the next thing, get things done, pick the kids up, get them to soccer practice, make sure that there's, money in the bank and food on the table and clothes on everybody's back, and get up the next morning and rinse and repeat. And we do it again and again and again. But we really don't think about where we're headed. We don't think about what it all means. We don't think about how we want to be known and what we're doing today, how it's driving towards that. And so many of us are like Alice when she hits that fork in the road in the story. And she really doesn't have a sense of direction. So we take and make choices, not based on what's right for us strategically or what's going to help us get where we want to go, but we make choices based on that pays more, or that offers more perks, or that sounds like more fun. And that's how we grow our careers. But the perception gap means being really clear about what that first piece is. How do you want to be known? At the end of your time here on this planet, when we're thinking back on your life, what do you want us to remember about you? I do this exercise with all of my clients, right? And some of them are very senior. They're running global companies. And when I first started asking those questions, I really thought they would say things like, I want to be remembered as, the person who drove the valuation of the company to this price before we did our first IPO. Or, the number of buildings that have my name on it, or, things that were materialistic or things that were business related. That was my naivete. I thought that's what was driving them. But in asking them that question, when they truly answer, and these are people, again, running big companies, they say things like, I want to be remembered as a good dad. I want to be remembered as someone who always had your back. I want to be remembered as someone who loved the life they were given, even though sometimes it wasn't always easy. But that I loved life. I woke up every day happy. Like, these are such emotional qualities. And so I ask you to think about first, what is it you want? What is this legacy? What is this ideal end state that you're working towards? What is this desired brand that's driving you? At the end of the day, there will come a point where you don't have a chance to do more. And at that point, hopefully you've done enough to secure that reputation. But you have the power today to start thinking about it and start making decisions and forming relationships and acting and speaking in ways that support that behavior and communication to make that legacy start coming true. And the really cool thing is you don't have to wait until you're old or until you're retiring or until you're taking your last breath to be able to enjoy it. You get to start enjoying it now. So thinking about where we're headed is important, but it's also important to think about where we're starting. So what is your reputation today, right? Do you have a problem? Are things going great? And maybe you don't know how you got here. I actually was hired by a client once, and I'll never forget. He said to me, he goes, everything is awesome. My clients love me. My team loves me. I make good money. I want to retire in about 10 years, and I have no idea what I did to get here. So I don't want to break it going forward. And really what he wanted was to reinforce strategically what he had done to this point so that he could replicate and build on it in the next 10 years and then retire. So it's not to say anything's wrong, but we have to assess where we're starting from. So think about this. If I were to ask 5 people to describe you using 3 words, take a moment and think about what would those words look like? Would they all be the same words? Would they have vastly different words? Do you anticipate they would be the same words you use to describe yourself? It's a great exercise. And when we talk about action steps in just a moment, I'm going to ask you to do that because it'll feel a little scary. Every client I do perception mapping surveys with, they all tell me that it terrifies them and then they love what comes back because we need other people to tell us how they see us. We are not the best judge of our own reputation, of our own brand, because we're seeing it through our own filter. It's kind of like you can't hear your voice the way other people hear your voice, because by the time it goes in your ears and it pings around all those different parts of your ear canal and then enters your brain, you are hearing it differently than somebody else hears your voice. The same is true for your reputation. And what often happens is you'll think your reputation is one thing, and maybe you're hedging your bets. Maybe you're not overly confident. Maybe you're just trying not to sound like you're bragging. So you use more conservative language. And then what people reflect back is like amazing. And they're seeing things in you that you never even knew that they saw. And you go, wow, that's pretty cool. The next question is that going to get you where you want to go? Is that kind of a reputation what you want, right? That's the next question you ask. But the first question is, how do you see me? And there are questions you can ask of people you trust. You can do it in email. You can do it on a conversation where there's not a lot of distractions, to just say to someone, what are some words you would use to describe me? Or what do you think makes me memorable? What makes me stand out amongst other people who might do what I do or have a similar background or status to me? What makes me stand out? If you had to offer me advice around my reputation, what advice would you give me? These are questions to help them unpack from their perception how they see you. And one of the hardest things when you ask for feedback is that you have to just be quiet. Don't argue. Don't defend. If you have to clarify, that's okay, but do so in a way that doesn't come across defensive, right? If I ask you, give me 3 words that you would use to describe me, and one of those words I don't like, and you're being honest, I can't start arguing with you or you'll never trust me again, right? That's how it works. So, you have to be able to just say, thank you. Because this person's given you a gift. They have given you the gift of insight about your perception, about your reputation today. Your job is going to be to map it to what you want. Your job is to take all the data you're going to get from all these people who are going to trust you enough and want to be part of your journey to share with you how they see you. And then you're going to use that to map to what you ultimately want, right? That's why we say, where are you starting and where are you headed? And then the strategy, then all the tools around personal branding come into play to help you go from here to there. So the perception gap is really important. And you may have a very small perception gap. You may have a lot of people who see you exactly how you ultimately want to be seen. Hats off to you if that happens. It was not what happened for me. When I started my business, I did a lot of perception work because I had tremendous success in my corporate career, but now my name was on the door. It was all about me and what I can offer to the market, not what my company or the organization that I represented was offering. So I had all, if you will, the skin in the game. And I had to be really clear about if there were any blind spots or what reputation assets I could really leverage to build this business. And I asked a lot of people about my reputation and I asked how they saw me. And I did exactly what I'm asking you to do. And some of it was amazing. I mean, people talked about how I was, compassionate and confident and warm, and they could tell that I loved what I did, and I loved those comments. And then there were the comments that sort of made me step back a little. People I trusted had said things like, well, I see you as really driven, but sometimes at the expense of people's feelings. Meaning, I think you sometimes go really fast, and that can in turn maybe lead you to not consider everybody in the room. So when you're running a meeting, you're not taking everybody's viewpoint into account. And those were the ones I really focused on, because that's not how I want to be known. And I had to really think about that. So without that insight, without that feedback, even though it wasn't pleasant, I wouldn't have been able to work on that. I wouldn't have been able to right size that. And now with my team, it's something I work really hard at, making sure that I'm not just giving direction, but that I'm soliciting input, because I want to change that reputation. It's meaningful. It's important to me that part of the reputation get changed. If there's something that you uncover in your perception gap, in your feedback, that you really don't care about, then don't worry about it. Right? If I came off stage and a client said to me, God, you were amazing, but you were a little large and in charge and loud and energetic, and I didn't love that. Well, I'm not going to change that. That's who I am. That's what I love about who I am, right? I love to use my large presence to bring people in. I'm not going to change that. But if a client said to me, I don't feel like you connected with your audience, I felt like you talked over them, that would be feedback I would pay attention to, because that's not how I want to be known. So think about, as you get feedback from people, what is it that you want to take action on, and what is it that you're kind of okay with? Maybe you asked the wrong person. Maybe that person wasn't your target audience. Maybe it's something you do a little less of going forward, but you don't have to completely overturn the apple cart. Over 1 million professionals around the world have taken my LinkedIn Learning courses, and they're seeing amazing results. Now it's your turn to join them. Visit my LinkedIn Learning page and see all the available options to create your personal brand, have honest career conversations, apply for a job inside your company, and grow your career. You can find the direct link in the show notes below. Your reputation is one of the most critical determinants of your career success. In my book, Control the Narrative, I help you create your strategy for building, pivoting, or repairing your reputation. Filled with real-life examples, this book contains strategic advice and tactical steps to consistently and confidently create a positive reputation. Pick up your copy today. Now let's talk about credibility. When we talk about personal branding, the first thing we have to establish is the credibility formula, because that is the foundation, right? Think about building a house. You don't just start putting furniture on dirt. You have to build a foundation, and then you have to put flooring in, and then you have to put framing in. Well, with personal branding, the foundation is credibility. And the only way to build credibility, and I've been doing this a long time, people, there is only one formula, and that is values plus action equals credibility. You want people to trust you. They have to know what you stand for, and they have to see you walk the talk. Pretty simple, right? Not exactly. Let's unpack this. So the credibility formula starts with values. And when I ask audiences, tell me about your values, I hear all sorts of values. And sometimes I'll put up cheat sheets around values just because people don't know what values are. And that's okay. Values are sort of your moral operating system. What are the non-negotiables for you? The qualities, the values that lead to principles that you couldn't deviate from because you wouldn't be yourself, right? So it might be faith. It might be compassion. It might be family as a value. It might be leadership, compassion, gratitude, right? These are values that you hold so dear, and they're so personal to you that without those values, you wouldn't be you. And what often gets tricky is our parents' values, our spouse's values, our friends, our social community, the cultural values often imprint on what we believe are our values, and they're not always. So many of you know I do a lot of work with the United States military, and I help veterans transition out of service and enter their civilian careers. And I do this exercise quite a bit with transitioning airmen, Marines, soldiers, all of them. And I often will say that if I were to ask all of them about their values, I would hear values along the lines of courage, service, duty, loyalty, right? Military values. Just like if you have parents with very strong values, you might have adopted some of those. But the formula is very personal, and it's very personal to you. So I'm asking you now to think about, what are your values? What drives you? What excites you? What qualities or beliefs or principles do you hold as a human being, as an individual, that you cannot move away from? That's the first part of the formula. And it is not a quick fix. It is not something you rattle off and move to the next, collect $200 and you move, you pass go. It is something that takes a lot of reflection. And at the same time, if you're thinking about your values and you start writing down 20, 30, 40 words, that's going to have to be a problem because you're going to need to distill that down. You're going to need to distill it down to a few values, because in order to build credibility, you can't be credible for 20, 30, 40 values. You can only be credible for a few to lead with, to be known for. And that exercise takes a lot of work. So think about the values that you stand for, write them down. If you get more than 5, try to consolidate them, try to prioritize them, try to absorb them into core values that really define who you are. When I went through this exercise, it actually wasn't as hard, and probably because I spend a lot of time thinking about this stuff. I came up with 2 off the top of my head that have never changed: gratitude and generosity. It's also the title of my TED Talk because it's that important to me. And it has led me to work with the military. It has led me to say yes to opportunities other people would have run away from, because I look for places where I can give more than is asked, right? Generosity. I want to always be sharing, always be giving. I'm, my love language is gifts, because I love to give. I love to share. If you look at my social media, it's so much content that I just give away because I believe, people will get value from that. And that makes me happy. I also am that person who obnoxiously wakes up every morning happy to be here, grateful for another day to do this again. And I look for opportunities where I can express gratitude, where I can feel gratitude. So gratitude and generosity, it influence how I hire. They influence the clients I choose to work with. They influence the things I say yes to. They influence all aspects of my life. And those are my 2 core values. It doesn't mean I don't have other values, right? My faith is important to me. My integrity is important to me. Honesty is important. All of these things are important to me, but I lead with gratitude and generosity. So really spend the time thinking about your values. Now, the next part might sound easier, right? Live your values. Action. Put your values into action. And in my experience, many of you are already living your values, right? You're doing the right thing. You're making good choices. You're showing up the way that is truthful and loving and kind to yourself and how you want to be known in this world. But the problem is, and the tricky part, maybe even the icky part of the formula, is that you have to now start attaching the values to the action. Here's what I mean by that. We talked about it a little bit earlier. The world is moving fast. People are inundated with information. And because of that, perception is often wrong. People get it wrong. They see something, they form a belief around it, and oftentimes it's incorrect because they just don't have time to process. They don't have time to figure things out. So they use the first assumption or judgment or belief they have about something, and that's what they assign as truth. Because of that, we need to attach our values to our action. And it's icky because it might feel, as I've heard many times, it might feel like you're taking credit for doing the right thing, or you're trying to, promote the fact that you're doing something good. And I understand that. And I get that that doesn't feel great. But if you can think about the bigger picture, right, that you're helping someone understand your why. You're helping them understand why you're doing what you're doing and not forming a misperception. I'll give you a couple examples. So when I work with the military, whether it's coaching, mentoring, speaking, writing, anything to do with the military, 99% of the time, it is a give back. It's pro bono. I don't get paid for it. And I do it because of my sense of pride as an American and my gratitude. There's gratitude. My gratitude for their military service, right? These men and women raise their hand to serve our country and protect my freedom. When I get on stage in front of an audience of military veterans or service members, I have to say, I am here today because I'm grateful for your service. I don't want there to be any misunderstanding of why I'm there. I don't want them to think, well, maybe she has nothing else to do. Maybe this is her business and she's trying to make money. I don't want there to be any misunderstanding. I have to make that connection. I am here today as a volunteer because I am grateful for the service you have given to this nation. And therefore, I'm sharing all this information, all of these tools and resources and all of that. That's the generosity part. And you're going to need to do the same thing. Here's another example. I spoke with a client recently who shared that his value was honesty. I said, okay. He said, it's literally just one. He goes, honesty is the center of everything I do. It is a non-negotiable. I'm unwavering. It is all about honesty. I said, okay. We talked about whether he actually meant candor or truthfulness or directness, because I'm a little bit of a wordsmith. And he said, no, it's honesty. And so, okay. So we landed on honesty. And he said, but it really doesn't work that well for me, this formula thing you're talking about, because I'm not establishing credibility for it. So he told me about a situation that had happened recently where he had to give some very hard feedback, he knew painful feedback to a direct report. And he said, I knew before the conversation even started, this person was going to get upset. They were not going to like what I had to share with them, but I had to give him the feedback. And so I sat him down. I told him straight up, I was completely honest, and I gave him the feedback. The person got visibly upset, left the office, and I sat there and thought, well, at least I was honest, right? I did what I was supposed to do. I didn't sugarcoat it. I didn't mince words. I was honest. And I thought I felt pretty good about it, he said, until a couple days later, I heard from other people that this direct report had told them that I was a jerk, that I had it out for them, that I must have been in a bad mood that morning and took it out on him. All these things which weren't true, all these misperceptions about what had actually happened. So honesty didn't work so well for me, he told me. And I asked him to consider a different scenario. What he should have done is still have the conversation, because that has to happen, but frame it differently. So sit the person down and say, look, I've got to give you some feedback. And I'm going to be straight up. It's not going to feel good, But one of the things I stand for is honesty. I believe in being direct, being straightforward, and being honest. And I'm going to be honest with you. I want you to be honest with me too, because that's how I operate. So I'm going to give you this feedback and I'm going to look for input at the end. Framing it that way takes all the misperception opportunity out of it, right? This other person doesn't wonder, why is he being such a jerk? Why is he so mean to me? Right? What got into him today? There's context. There's no misperception. So that's why I say that the action part might feel a little icky. It does mean you're going to have to start using that language. You're going to have to start working it into conversation, because the first time someone sees you act according to your values, they're going to be interested. The second time, they're going to be a little more convinced. The third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, ninth, 10th time, they start to believe it, right? They start to believe that, yeah, I can be honest with this person because I've seen them be honest when it would have been a lot easier to just paint a different picture, right? Or skirt the issue. But I've seen this person lean into being honest. And that's how you start building trust. That's how you start building credibility around your word, around your name, because your values are yours. And your values are what make you amazing and special and unique and valuable. We just need to start telling the world about who you are. Not just what you do, but who you are. That's where the beauty comes in. That's where the joy comes in. That's where the clarity comes in. When you know where you're starting and where you're heading, when you're really crystal clear about what you stand for, how you want to go through this thing called life and show up and make decisions and be known and build credibility, the other stuff isn't as hard. Trust me, it isn't as hard. What do you post on social media? How do you dress for a job interview? Who should you know and be networked with? How do you introduce yourself at a job fair? Those things aren't hard to solve for if you do the hard work up front. And most people miss that. Most people are just going through their day, doing their stuff, getting the kids to soccer, making sure the mortgage gets paid, showing up the next day and doing it all over again. And they aren't thinking about this. You have given yourself a gift by listening to this conversation. You've given yourself a gift of breath, of pause, of reflection. Take advantage of that. Listen to this message again if you need to. It's okay. That's why it's a podcast. You can listen as many times as you'd like. You can save it. You can bookmark it. You can come back to it. However many times you need to hear this, so that you really start unpacking the joy and the beauty that is you. That's what influence is about. That's what personal branding is about. And that's what I'm about. So I want to leave you with some action steps from today's conversation. I want to encourage you to do a perception audit. It's going to feel scary. It always does. But ask some people that you know and trust how they perceive you. I encourage you to not only think about people who are going to give you like good answers. And I don't mean like ask someone you just fired, because I've had clients do that. I don't understand. But ask people who you wonder, like, how do they really see me? And frame it up to let them know that you're asking these questions because you really want to understand how to best serve your team, your organization, your community. And so you're looking at the way that you're known to see if there are blind spots or opportunities. Frame it up and tell them you trust them and ask them some questions. If it feels easier, which it does for most clients, do it on an email. And if they don't respond, that's okay. Maybe it was too much for them. But see if some people do respond and see what the words are that they would use to describe you. See what makes you memorable and take it in, look at the list, and then ask yourself, how close is that to what you want to be known for? And if it is close, then you're going to need a strategy to make sure that you don't mess it up. If it's not close, you're going to need a strategy to move you in that direction. Next, I want you to start thinking about your values. Write them down. Find a quiet place to really get within yourself and ask yourself, if I had to make a hard decision, if I had to assess an important opportunity, what values would I draw upon to help me make those decisions? What are non-negotiables for me? And write them down. Try to get the list to 3 or under. Doesn't mean you don't have other values. It just means you're distilling it. And then as you start acting those values, as you start showing up that way, start working that in. Start working it into your language. Start working it into the narrative that you're telling people online and in person about who you are. And third, start to assess your environment. Are you in the right place? Are you around the right people? Is there something that feels off? When something feels off, we often feel it in our stomach, in our gut, our heart, or our head. If something feels off, start writing that down. We don't have to decide what it is yet, but just start writing it down. It could be that your environment or the people you're working with or the work that you're doing isn't aligned with where you want to be in your desired brand, your ultimate reputation and legacy. It could be that you're not living your values. But don't make any big decisions. Just start becoming mindful of this, becoming aware. I hope this conversation was helpful. I have so enjoyed our time together today, and I'll look forward to our next conversation. Please subscribe, follow me, and stay tuned because we've got a lot of great programs coming soon. I wish you safety, health, and happiness, and a wonderful rest of your day. Bye.
Thanks for tuning in to the Lida Citroën Podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to follow the show and leave a review. It helps more people discover these inspiring conversations. For more tools, insights, and resources, visit Lida360.com or connect with Lida on LinkedIn. Until next time, remember, your influence has the power to make a real difference.